The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are my own or those of my guests, and in no way represent the views of the company or companies that I or we work for. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they are told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk.
You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast dedicated to the journey and the challenges surrounding the life and career of Aviator Tony, his co-hosts, and his guests. Together, we will explore the many pathways to an aviation profession, the realities of what a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, an airline pilot currently flying for a legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. But this is episode 64 of Squawk Ident, recorded on Friday, December 4th, 2020, from the Aviator Sound Studios from somewhere in Southern California. On today's episode, I and my fellow Squawk Ident crew members sit down with a fascinating airline pilot. He's a flight instructor, a former freight dog, flight school founder, entrepreneur, and dare I say, even a social media influencer. We discuss his amazing journey in aviation, his position as a co-founder and director of operations at Icarus Flight Academy, and we explore his growing footprint in the industry. Now that our pre-flight is complete, let's push off the gate, start up the virtual podcast engines, and get ready for takeoff. Well, joining me today to help me kick off today's show is another exceptional aviator. He is a professional CFI II-MEI flight instructor, a former Embraer 145 airline pilot, a King Air instructor, a Falcon 2000 commander, a captain, and a corporate operator as well. He joins us from his spectacular chateau in San Diego, California, where he is recovering from a heavy flight schedule. Please help me in welcoming back to the show, Captain Roger. Captain, how the heck are you?
I'm doing all right, Tony. How are you? Like you said, I've been really busy the past, 2 or 3 months, and the last week and a half over the Thanksgiving holiday. But as of right now, knock on wood, things are looking a little bit lighter for me, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, good. I'm kind of in the same boat. As a zero-time line guy at Legacy Airlines, I've been fighting for scraps here and there, and I just finished my third sequence in 2 weeks. Had 30 hours off in between each one, and it's been kind of busy. I don't ever do that to myself, but I had no choice here, and so I squeezed in almost an entire month's worth of flying in the last 2 weeks. And today was hard to get started. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, but I know you're in a little bit of a different situation, and my heart's out to you, and best of luck with that. But I'm glad you have been able to get some flying.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, and it's been good. Been flying with some great people, and we've been dealing with a lot of stressful situations over here at Legacy with the with everything that's happening and the fact that the CARES Act hasn't really gone through. Now I've stopped listening to any of that noise. I'll believe it when I see it, and this industry, the vaccine, is really looking like it's going to be potentially what's going to turn around passenger confidence in the industry. So let's see what happens. I've got right now pretty much the entire month of December off, not by choice.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'll be able to pick up some scraps here. And but let me tell you, there's sharks in the water, man. There's sharks in the water.
Always.
Yeah. Well, also joining us today is another superb Squawk Ident co-host. He is a former international and professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an A&P, an avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, and a commercial drone operator as well. He is currently a 737 pilot for Legacy Airlines, the name we use here on the show as an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. From his fortress of isolation, where the second wave has caused mass hysteria and every gun shop in town is got lines around the corner. From somewhere in Flower Mound, Texas, please help me in welcoming back to the show, Mr. Rob D. Rob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing really well, Tony. It's good to be back. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. How's the flying going? Anything?
Not since the Thanksgiving holiday. Did a 4-day trip over the holiday and spent 30 hours in Raleigh, Durham. So I had the whole day off, and that's where we had some turkey and just had a really good crew, good captain. We had a lot in common. I was actually older than him, which was weird. Haven't
Wow.
had something like that in a while.
Yeah.
But and that makes me feel really old. So but we had a lot in common, and so that made it a really cool 4-day trip. And I'm just happy that got to fly with him, and the weather was good. No real nothing happened out of the ordinary, so it was just a good week to fly.
Yeah. Well, good. I too had that 30-hour layover over the Thanksgiving holiday. Mine, fortunately for me, was at Myrtle Beach. So I did a quick flight from LA to Dallas, swapped aircraft after about a 2-hour sit, and then we headed on over to Myrtle Beach, got in at a decent hour, got a run in, got caught in the rain out
Nice.
there. So it was nice.
There you go.
The captain and I got together for Thanksgiving dinner. They had a really fancy affair there at the hotel. It was a
nice.
special kind of Thanksgiving meal that they had set up for not just crew members, but for people, because the beach was open. People were out there, and
cool.
So yeah, everybody was social distancing, wearing masks, and doing all the things that we're supposed to be doing. But yeah, it wasn't crowded, but it was definitely people out there on the beach having a good time. A lot of family out there. I guess when you have to get together and you don't want to get together indoors, why not just head on out to the beach and hang out? So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, the hotel we were staying at was one of those Hyatt Place hotels. It was really nice little quaint places. There was only 12 crew members there for the for Thanksgiving, and so one of the employees just volunteered to cook us a turkey and
wonderful.
all the sides. So that was really 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 nice of them, and it tasted really good. And so all 12 of us were down there. Enjoying a nice little holiday meal together, which is something we should do as a crew. So that was a good time.
Yeah, for sure. Gentlemen, today we have the privilege in speaking with an inspiring young aviator and entrepreneur who has agreed to share his journey in aviation with us. He and I first met a while back while flying together at a regional we call Sandpiper. This was back in 2017. Sandpiper is an alias to his employer, one of the wholly owned subsidiaries to an airline that we here on the show call Legacy Airlines. He is an Embraer expert. He's a pilot holding type ratings in the Embraer 120, 145, and 175. He is a co-founder and director of operations at Icarus Flight Academy at both Republic Airport in Farmingdale, New York, and Brookhaven, New York. He joins us from his swinging bachelor pad in Dallas, Texas. Please help me in welcoming back to the show, Captain Kareem. Captain, how you doing?
Oh, we're starting now. Okay. I am fantastic. It's a beautiful December day here in Dallas, Texas, although my bones are starting to hurt, so I guess that's an indication that it's starting to get cold. Otherwise, it's a great day. It's been a fairly easy week, and I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for bringing me on and giving me the opportunity to talk about my experience and talk about my background in aviation. Hopefully we can get some younger people motivated and help them navigate this crazy pandemic and keep them on track to hopefully being where we're at here in a few years.
Yeah, for sure. And that's really the whole point of the podcast is we talk about, it started out the journey of Aviator Tony and all the struggles and challenges that Aviator Tony had. And then I brought on these wonderful co-hosts that have agreed to let me torture them every week with a podcast episode. And, we get to hear their side of it. Having this well-rounded team really has been an honor. And to have you come on and, share your journey with us. I was impressed when I first met you. I've been keeping an eye on you and following you on social media, and I'm still as impressed and even more so today. So thank you again for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So New York City, huh? What was it like growing up in New York City? What was your childhood like?
Very tough, I think. The running joke is we all drive around with a baseball bat in the back of our trunk, and I would say that's a pretty good I guess, a metaphor as to how it kind of is. So I would say pretty tough in a very good way, though.
You think that maybe kind of molded your personality to fight for what's, success?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. As I was growing up, I wasn't the greatest student in the world. Academically, I was a kind-hearted guy, I would say. I got along with just about everybody, but I don't think I was the greatest academic. And that isn't because I wasn't capable. It was I had my interest set elsewhere. I was very, very motivated, very work driven. I was very much looking forward to graduating and getting into the work world. That's what keeps me driven in all aspects, in aviation, outside of aviation. More. That's pretty much essentially what growing up in New York does to you. It gets you very motivated and very aggressive. It's an acquired taste. I think when people meet for the first time a genuine New Yorker, especially someone like myself that travels and I meet people from other states, it's very kind of intimidating, and it catches them by surprise. They're like, "Oh wow, they really are kind of jerks." But in reality, I don't think I don't think that's the way I try to come off. I think it just kind of happens. We're honestly really nice people. I think we're really nice people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I lived there you could say I lived there. I was there about a year, right there in Kew Gardens in Queens, for my time that I spent there, being based there. And I got to agree. I mean, New Yorkers are tough people, and they have to be. You're in a city, one of the oldest cities in the continental U.S., and you got to be tough. You're stacked on top of each other. You got to fight for your piece of the pie. And I really do think that does mold some greatness there. And at the end of the day, underneath that kind of what is stereotypically thought as a hard shell, usually people go out of their way for you, and they're pretty cool when they get to know you. But until they get to know you, look out, get out of my way.
It takes us. I'm walking here, but
That's
I
right.
think it's really interesting to when you look at New Yorkers as a whole, it usually takes a tragedy or usually takes something of great significance for people to really see how kind-hearted New Yorkers are. And it's really, 9/11 is a great example. Even this COVID pandemic, people just come together as if they're family. When you see something crazy happen on a subway, somebody gets attacked, somebody falls ill on a subway, it seems like everybody just jumps in, and it's really quite magical to see, and it reminds you, it's like, okay, that's what really New York is about, and that's what New Yorkers are about.
Yeah,
Cool.
And to borrow a very I think fitting phrase from Spike Lee, New Yorkers know they got to do the right thing.
That's right.
So what sparked your journey in aviation? What was that moment for you?
It's actually a really funny story. I would say I've always had an interest in flying. I always enjoyed traveling with the family and staring out the window on airplanes. Now I kind of like the aisle seat. Now that I'm in the profession, the aisle seat's nice because you can just get up and go use the bathroom without bothering people. But at the age of 10, it was my 10th birthday. My aunt walks in with this huge box, and it was wrapped up. I tear it open, and it was a karaoke machine. And I'm not much of a singer. Maybe in the shower, but not so much of a singer. And it came with a gift receipt, and I felt terrible. But I went to Best Buy, returned the karaoke machine, and bought Microsoft Flight Simulator. Yeah. So it all started with the karaoke machine. And I always joke. I say, I don't know where I'd be right now. Who knows? I might be more successful, or maybe nowhere at all. But it all started essentially with that karaoke machine at the age of 10.
Wow. So so you get this karaoke machine, and you're like,
I was gonna say, it reminds me of a joke, when you're singing and you're horrible, and your buddy goes, "Hey man, what'd you do with all the money?" You're like, "I took flying lessons."
That's right. And then from there it was just an ongoing battle to persuade the family, mom and dad, that this is a serious thing. I would run home from school with my two best friends, and we would just spend hours on our computer on Flight Simulator. And it wasn't until about the age of 13 that the folks started realizing, okay, well, I guess he's serious about this. And I met a lot of great mentors along the way, professional pilots, air traffic controllers, you name it, and started taking flight lessons at the age of 13 and just full speed ahead from there.
Yeah.
Wow.
And was the flight lesson that you were taking, were they a Part 61 course where it was kind of self-paced, or were you like all in with the 141?
It was even better. I didn't touch 141 until I was a flight instructor and started teaching students. Then I entered the 141 world. I did 61 the whole way. I'm a huge supporter of 61. I think it's great to go at your own pace if you have that luxury and you have the time. My first flight lesson and my first flight instructor was just this independent guy. He owned his own airplane. He did something else professionally, and on the weekends he would flight instruct. And I thought that was the best. I thought that was the greatest type, because you really get this one-on-one. And this was an older gentleman. He, again, this was just his hobby. So he really did give it his 100%. And he was very motivated to make sure I had the best education possible. I mean, we were just phasing out, or not quite, but NDBs were just being phased out. And he was like, nope, I'm teaching you the old fashioned way. And I'm grateful that we did that, because later on in my career, I became a cargo pilot and I was based in the Caribbean, and NDBs and ADFs and so on and so forth were still in use. And the aircraft I would fly were very unautomated, and it was just bare bones. So it was actually a really good experience. And looking back at that, it's the little things that really make it matter.
Yeah, and we're gonna try to get into detail with your time there as a freight dog. You do share that in common with our very own Captain Roger here. But let's move forward just a little bit and talk about your high school experience. Now, you went to a high school that is very unique in the country and is dedicated for young men and women to study aviation exclusively. Can you tell me a little bit about Aviation High School in Queens?
Sure. In my opinion, aviation high school, really any technical high school, is the best type, especially for younger people, where it's very easy to become unmotivated with the education system, especially in New York City. And I lived really, really far. It was about a 3-hour commute round trip for me going to aviation high school on the train. And my zone school was much closer to home. I had a very hard time getting into aviation high school. I didn't quite have the grades, and I also lived very, very far. So with the New York spirit and fighting attitude, I went over to aviation high school probably close to a dozen times before I even graduated middle school. And I just bombarded the director of admissions, the deans, the principal, everybody. And it was just a constant. They would see me probably twice a month, and I would go there begging them to let me into the school. And aviation high school is a maintenance school. It's a 4 to 5 year high school. The 5th year, you get your second license, and you get your airframe power plant licenses over there, it costs you 50 to 80 grand to do on your own in college or at some aviation maintenance school. And my mindset and logic at the time was, okay, well, they don't teach you how to fly. I'll do that on my own, but it'll teach me how to fix airplanes, and it'll teach me, it'll make me a more well-rounded aviator. So yeah, fortunately I was accepted. All that bombarding paid off, and I started aviation high school. And it was after the first year I realized this is going to be a really tough adventure, because I would leave the house around 5 o'clock in the morning, and during the wintertime you wouldn't even see sunlight, and I would leave school at 4:15 at the earliest, not including extracurriculars.
Wow.
And I would be home and the sun would still be down. So it's like I never saw sunlight. I felt like I was in Alaska.
Yeah, full time. And Kareem, I remember the first time we flew together, and I think actually it was the one and only time we flew together. What can you tell me? Do you remember about that?
I don't remember much. I remember you, and I think I actually might have accidentally rubbed shoulders with you at JFK after the fact. I don't remember much about that, but I remember you, and I remember it was pleasant, and that's why I'm here, and that's what matters, I guess.
Yeah, we flew together. I was, I think I was a new captain, like brand new captain, and you were a new first officer, and together we're like, okay, and I believe that was in New York, and I was, confident and ready to go, but New York was kind of new to me. I had flown in there plenty of times as a first officer, but now being in command of an aircraft and having a new hire next to me, it was intimidating. And I do remember that what impressed me was you were so young, and your level of professionalism, how you spoke, how you dressed the part. Your uniform was, tip top, which is sometimes a rarity with newer aviators. And you were telling me a little bit about how when you were somewhere around high school, you volunteered to be a New York police officer auxiliary officer, and the commonality that we shared was my younger sister did the very same thing here in California. And so I was really impressed how young you were to do that. What sparked that interest?
I really enjoy the volunteer stuff. Anything that has to do with volunteering. Also, law enforcement. I'm a huge supporter of law enforcement. That was always my backup to aviation, I would say. But really, that specific move to sign up and to go to training and to actually do it came from also kind of a funny story. My best friend and I, who's a brilliant, brilliant kid. He's a Harvard grad, also a pilot, helicopter pilot, fixed wing flight instructor, you name it. Very smart kid. Him and I were watching the movie Let's Be Cops in theaters, and we thought it was the greatest thing ever. So the very next day, we signed up. We went over for our interviews, and it's very hard when you're young, especially we were just at the age cutoff, and they've actually changed it and they've made it more competitive and increased the age restrictions because of how dangerous it's starting to become. But we walked in there for the interview, and we had this big, macho, scary looking police officer that was in charge of everything. And he was like, well, what makes you qualified? And anyway, we started talking about us, and I was a private pilot instrument at the time, and so was Will. And he lost his mind. He went into his wallet. He pulled out a pilot's medical from before I was even born. I mean, the thing was brown. And he said, I was taking flight lessons back then. And sure enough, his instructor at the time was my examiner over the years.
Wow.
And we just
world.
connected. It's a very small world, and he never pursued aviation as a career. He really wanted to. So over the years of us being with the NYPD, I eventually became his flight instructor, signed him off for his private, and he retired from the NYPD, and now he's trying to turn this into a career. So you just never know how what life throws at you.
Yeah. You have to pay attention and seize those moments when you see them. And yeah, absolutely. What a great story about a small world of aviation. And somewhere around 2012, you joined the Civil Air Patrol. What did the Civil Air Patrol give you, and what did you give to the Civil Air Patrol?
So CAP was short-lived because I was actively working on flying and taking flight lessons. I was also in the JROTC in my high school, again, kind of the service before self and just volunteering. But really, CAP was me exploring the military option. I was really kind of considering joining the military as an air traffic controller, not even as a pilot, and then eventually started shifting my attention to maybe becoming a helicopter pilot in the Army, and so on and so forth. And that was just a really good experience for me to just get a little bit of a taste of how things could be, putting on the uniform every day, dressing sharp. And you mentioned that earlier about the first time you met me, and just the image you portray and the way you present yourself in the uniform and all that. And that's kind of where a lot of that came from. It's really important, especially when you're young, to portray yourself appropriately, to fit the part, so that your passengers and your coworkers are confident in your abilities and are confident in you as a professional.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, I think, I don't know if I've ever shared this story. You've reminded me of this, and Rob and Roger, feel free to jump in on this. I believe perception in this career field is close to everything. We people really don't understand, the typical passenger, the typical person who buys an airline ticket doesn't really understand the complexities of our profession. And they think we push a button to take off and push a button to land. Oh, the planes fly themselves, right? Like those Teslas? Yeah, no. And so, add on top of that, what we're required to know knowledge-wise, to be able to speak all those different types of languages, be it communication with ATC, regulations, aircraft operations and systems, to charts and IFR flight planning and weather, reading the weather charts. It's a lot of information. So to show up prepared, clean, pressed, shoes polished, I think it's extremely important. I've been asked that question on interviews. I was asked that question when I was interviewing to become a check airman, as in my short time that I was doing that job. Um, the person who was given the interview said, what do you think of the uniform? How important is it? It's extremely important. And to be here at this level, whether that's flying a small piston-powered airplane around for a Part 91 operator, to flying a $1 million corporate jet, to flying in an airline, it's all crucial that we kind of portray this particular standard of how we come across. And it reminds me of a story that a captain once told me, that he was giving IOE to a student, and the student showed up, and he came early, and he says, "Hey, well, while you're here, let's do a little Chicago O'Hare review, so that when we get in the airplane, you can kind of follow along on your first day." And the student was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure." And so while the check airman was talking to him, he pulls out his phone and he's answering a text message. And so the check airman stops, and he's like, "I'll wait." And, "Oh, sorry. So the student puts away the phone, and now he's giving him more. "Okay, so we're going to talk to here, we're going to talk to ramp, and here's the taxi route we're going to take, so that way you can follow along," and stuff like that. And another text message comes down, and the student picks up his phone, and he's looking at his phone, and the check airman goes, "You know what? F you." And he walks out of the crew room, and the senior FO that was flying with the check airman, because this was an observation, tells the student, "Okay, dude, just get your stuff. Let's go to the airplane. We'll go do a walk around." So they go do the walk around, and this poor guy is like, now kind of like, "Oh crap, I screwed up. I'm going to get fired." He's sitting on the jet bridge. The captain shows up intentionally like 10 minutes prior to departure with a coffee in his hand, gets in the cockpit, gets everything set up. The FO he was flying with had it all set up for him. Everybody's boarded up, and this new hire sticks his head meekly into the cockpit and says, "Are you? Is it cool that?" He goes, turns around, he goes, "I don't know. Is it cool? Am I going to see that damn phone again during this trip?" He's like, No, you won't." He goes, "I better not." So they flew together, and he says, "You know what? By the second day, this guy was on it. He was studying. He was really well prepared. I thought I got through to him. I actually thought, you know what? This is just a little kick in the pants he needed. I got through to him. He's going to be professional." Well, a month later, he's walking down the terminal, Terminal G in Chicago, and he sees this kid walking towards him. His shirt's untucked, his collar's open, the tie's all loose, his pants look like crap. He doesn't have the jacket on, and he walks right up to him. He just reads him the riot act, and he's like, "I should write you up right now," And it was all one of those things where he just didn't really respect the uniform. And so to come across and meet somebody, especially somebody young that's in the industry, this is their first airline job, it's really nice to see when someone comes prepared, and how important it is to keep that standard. And you get it.
Yeah, if
Absolutely.
you look at it, even like in today's world, like right now with the pandemic and everything that's going on, if we walk up to the airplane without a mask or half-assing it with a mask, I mean, how much confidence does that give the traveling public? I mean, just those little things, like you said, just the way you wear your uniform, wear your mask, not looking at your phone when you're being briefed or whatever, something like that. I mean, those little things go a long way.
Yeah. And the worst is when they're deplaning and you're in the cockpit or on the jet bridge, and the passengers are walking by and they're saying, "Thank you, thank you." And you're like,
Yeah, no way.
Yeah.
I put it down. I say thank you to everybody.
It's all part of the job. That's actually part. It should be a job description, because it's all part of the job, and it's important to dress properly in anything, in any aspect of your life. Unless you're sitting at home wearing penguin pajamas like I was not very long ago.
Well played.
Behind closed doors. But otherwise, it's important to dress professionally. I'm a skinny guy. I'm a very skinny guy. It's very difficult to keep my shirt tucked in and looking sharp and professional. The solution to that for all you future young aviators they're called slingshots. They're like $5. You attach them to your sock, you attach them to the bottom of your shirt, and it keeps it nice and straight forever. And I've been doing that since high school, and they're great and they're cheap, and you'll look like $1 million every time.
Yeah, I have quite a few different varieties of that in my drawer too.
Yeah.
Right.
Unfortunately, I'm no
problem.
longer skinny.
Yeah, I've got a nice little like indentation around my waist. Everything kind of just sets in.
It's really funny. I'll look at photos over the years, right, of how I used to dress, even when I would be in a suit or whatever at a very young age. And I look and you can see the progression. You can say, okay, well, that's around the year I started getting things tailored. And that's the year that I started wearing slingshots. And that's the year that I started. So it's really important. It's an ongoing challenge, and it's good to get with the times and to always look your very best. That's the only way people are going to take you seriously, especially if you're young.
Yeah, and you open up the door for opportunity when you're doing that. I can tell you stories on how walking through the terminal, I've been stopped by little old ladies because when I was captain in New York City, I would always wear the hat, and and people looked at me, you've got 2 of the 3, and I'm like, 2 of the 3? What are you talking about? I had an FO tell me one time, you got salt and pepper hair, that's strike 1. You wear the hat, that's strike 2. The only thing you don't have is a mustache, that's strike 3. And I'm like, well, what happened if I was 3? He goes, then you'd be an asshole. And so what did I do? A month later, I had a mustache for a while. But I always wore the hat, and I can't tell you how many times I got stopped by a little lady going, oh, you look so sharp, Captain. I'm like, yeah, thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. And that little tiny interaction, that meant the world to me, just to be recognized for that. So, yeah. But let's get back to you. After high school, you went on. What happened after that? Was there some aeronautics training going on, or what happened?
So 6 days after high school, after graduating, I mean, I was so ready to get out of there. I didn't even attend my high school graduation. That's one of my biggest regrets, because my mother was upset. She said, I practically gave birth to you to watch you walk across that stage, and you weren't there. Oh. It was a terrible, big regret. Go to your graduations, kids. It's important. And I graduated 6 days later. I was back in flight school working on my flight instructor ratings and everything else, all 3 of them, MEI, CFI, CFII. And just a very short 5, maybe 6 months later, I had everything done, all the ratings done. Wow. That following Monday, I can't remember what day I finished my ratings. All I remember is the following Monday, I had my very first job as a flight instructor at the largest 141 flight school in New York, in Farmingdale. And it was just hustle, build flight time. I was very, very young, and I was very, very motivated and very driven. I wasn't even old enough to move on and go to the airlines. So my sole purpose at the time was to just do a really good job as a flight instructor. So that's what really kept me motivated. Instructors, they build their time, they get close to 1,000 or 1,500 or wherever they qualify, and they get very lazy towards the end. In my case, I didn't quite have that, because I knew that this was the only thing I could do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you played it correctly because you built your time relatively quickly. And as you mentioned, you were a little too young to go to the airlines. So you chose a different path, at least different from those that go to an aviation college and then an aviation flight school and then right into an airline. At least that's the goal for most people. But you didn't have that as an option, and you went to fly cargo. How did that transition happen, and what made you decide to take that leap?
I was ready to move on. I was ready to do something other than instructing that paid a little more. At the time, it was pretty tough, especially for that year, making $15 an hour, commuting all the way from the city limits to Long Island, and gas and so on and so forth. It was just becoming a very tough thing. So I knew I had to make a change, and I had to go on and build my experience elsewhere. So an opportunity came up for me to go fly cargo. I was hired as a first officer on the Embraer 120, which was very cool for me at that age and that experience level. I was hired as a Miami pilot, and in INDOC, while I was in training, I found out from an external source that my airline had shut down the Miami base. Cool. And that was a smack in the face. I said, oh, well, I'm screwed now. What am I going to do? And I walked into the chief pilot's office. I asked him, I said, is this true? He said, yes. He says, but I'll give you the option to go to any base you want in the system. And he recommended that I go to Puerto Rico. being very young and naive and uneducated, I said, I'm not going to Puerto Rico. I'll go anywhere but Puerto Rico. And sure enough, I go home, or I go back to the hotel. I consult with my mentors, and they said, go to Puerto Rico. If it means more flight time, quicker upgrade, go. So I did. I went down to Puerto Rico at the ripe old age of 19, and didn't have a car, didn't have anything. It was a total culture shock. And on that side of the island in Aguadilla, people spoke very little English, and I didn't speak a lick of Spanish. So it was it was a unique experience. The first week was brutal in terms of a culture shock. Past that, it was just status quo. I flew all over the Caribbean, parts of South America. I saw that whole part of the world. So it was truly a very unique experience. I got experience in icing with big turboprops. The Embraer 120 is a legend, I would say, in the aviation industry. And anyone that had the chance to fly it understands why. Icing conditions, I mean, hazmat, live animals, you name it, extended over water operations. It was just really, really, really a good experience.
Do you mind if we mention who you flew for?
Sure. Ameriflight. And okay. I think they're a great company.
Yeah. So you have this commonality with our own Captain Roger. Captain Roger formerly flew for a company that you share in common, which is Ameriflight. Now, if anyone that's listened to the podcast, if they go back to episode 9, that was the first time I believe Roger and I collaborated and did a show together. And we all talk about his journey and how he survived a very traumatic experience at Ameriflight. Roger is the pilot who survived the bird strike over Sholo. And Roger, what do you were flying the 1900, correct?
I was flying the Beech 99.
Oh, Beech 99.
Am I, I guess my first question, am I still part of the Ameriflight training program over there for that?
I don't know. I don't recall. I recall seeing photos, but I don't recall if it was in training.
Apparently, I've had some people that have gone through training and said, "Oh yeah, that shows up in the training program," which I wasn't ever really sure for what. I mean, you don't really put an incident like that in any training manuals, but I kind of feel honored, I guess. But most people who have flown at Ameriflight since then have heard of me. I'm the guy.
He's the guy. And if you want to go back and listen, that was episode 9 of Squawk Ident, where Roger... episode 8. I'm sorry. Episode 8 of Squawk Ident, where Roger talks about his journey. And Rob, crazy, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I was going to say, you got to listen to it, Kareem. It's crazy, his story. It's amazing.
Yeah, I had no idea that was you. I guess that's cool. That's cool.
Very lucky to be alive. We're very lucky to have Roger with us. And it's so cool that, you guys kind of share that time together. And I got to say, and I texted Roger when I saw this, there are YouTubers out there that have been posting videos of, them being in a Cessna and hitting a bird.
I did see that.
And they use for their cover shot a picture of Roger's aircraft. I'm like, wait a minute.
Truly.
What? Why are you bogarting my buddy's
stealing my thunder?
I know. So if you're a YouTuber or a social media developer and you decide to post a video of a bird strike, that's great. Use your own damn cover shot. Don't use Roger's, just to be more dramatic. But yeah, so your time at Ameriflight was relatively short, wasn't it? About a year?
Yeah, it was about a year, and that is because I had the opportunity to go do something else after the fact, and that is the flight school. And I started the flight school while I was still at Ameriflight. I was commuting weekly between Aguadilla, Puerto Rico, and New York, and it was very challenging because I would fly Monday through Friday at the airline. Friday night, I would head home for 2 hours, change, repack, and then head back to the airport to start what sometimes would be a 13 to 16 hour commute because I would have to 3-leg it. We didn't have the appropriate reciprocal agreements at the time, so it was very tough. Yeah. And as the flight school started to grow and as things started to progress, it was time to make it end and pick one or the other.
Yeah. And tell us, how does someone start a flight school? I mean, I have a little bit of experience in that, and I chose not to because I felt for myself the risk was too high because I was going in really with a partner, but the financial burden was going to fall all on me. And as a flight instructor, I just couldn't do it. How did you start it?
Really good story. We put out a video on my YouTube channel. It's the Kareem Shaheen, and explaining kind of how that process happened, because a lot of people have that question. And in the aviation industry, it's very difficult to A, start a flight school, and B, make sure it succeeds. I had a former student of mine, a former client, and he was much older than I was. He calls me out of the blue. He says, "Hey, can you meet me up in New York? I want to talk to you about an opportunity." I fly up to New York. There was a 1987 Cessna 172 waiting for us. And he said, "Oh, I just bought this airplane." We flew over to, I think it was Oxford, Connecticut. We had a lunch flight, and he said, "I want to start a flight school, and I want to do it with you. You seem to know everybody at the airport. You seem to have the experience. I know you're young, but you're very driven." And I've always expressed that I was interested in business when I was his flight instructor. So that was kind of the gist of it, and how we did that. We would meet in between my Ameriflight job and my days off, and we essentially created a list. We compiled a list of the things we didn't like about other flight schools, from image. One of the biggest things that really annoyed me was customer service at flight schools, because there was a pilot shortage, and flight schools, I guess, because there was a pilot shortage and there was very high demand for pilots, and a lot of these schools were pilot mills, they didn't believe in customer service. You'd go in there and you'd feel like you were an employee rather than a customer. And I had a big problem with that. I didn't believe that any customer, if you're paying money, you should be treated very nicely, not just fair, but very nice. So that was one of the things that we wanted to change. Also image, we talk about image all the time, and we wanted to give off this very luxurious, very clean, very modern, high-end flight school. So the comparison, when people come into our office for the first time, they say, "Wow, this is like an Apple store." And that was another goal. And in business, you've got to have one of three things if you want it to succeed. You've got to be the first, you've got to be the most unique, or you've got to be the cheapest. And we were certainly not the first to open a school. We're not going to be the cheapest, but we were going to be the most unique. And that's how we did it.
Yeah, and it's really inspiring to hear that you were able to kind of flip this into such a successful business, really. And how did that take a lot of time out of your flying?
It took a lot of time, and that's ultimately why I had to quit flying for Ameriflight. At one point, at the beginning stages, when we were a smaller school with a limited fleet, but we didn't quite have the name, I was the instructor, I was the director of operations, I was the chief flight instructor, I was everybody. And it was brutal, because I was flying 120 hours a month, 100 hours a month, and shuffling the office work. And that tends to be a hard thing. But again, if you want a business to succeed at the beginning, it's very difficult, it's very tough, but everybody's capable of it. Anybody with a great brain, or just a functioning brain, is capable of doing the same thing I did. You just have to push forward. I had obstacles. I mean, because I was young, we had competitors that were very envious and very upset that it was myself and my partner involved. And we dealt with threats. We dealt with fire. We dealt with just a lot of nonsense. And it truly was a very difficult thing to navigate, but you learn to deal with it, you learn to live with it, and you learn to be tough. And as long as you come off as tough, and you come off as, "Hey, you can't bully me around," you tend to do pretty well. And then from there, you can only make so much money off of a flight school. It's very difficult to make a flight school profitable. So we said, okay, well, we have to do a few things different. Number one, we have to keep evolving and keep progressing and becoming unique. So we eventually started painting our aircraft the same color. We incorporated a call sign that I negotiated with the air traffic control facilities that were nearby. So we have a call sign agreement. And then from there, we opened up the maintenance shop and the avionics shop, and we just expanded from there. We partnered up with Avidyne. We do all of that. And that's truly why the school continues to succeed, even during this pandemic.
Yeah, and are you seeing an influx of student pilots? I've spoken with a few flight schools here in Southern California, and they indicated to me that they're actually increasing their flight operations, because a lot of the students that were going to an aviation college, taking classes, taking a few lessons here and there, since their college classes are now mostly online, their schedules have opened up, and they're really taking to the skies of GA much more. Are you seeing that as well?
Absolutely. At the beginning stages of the pandemic, we saw a little bit of a decrease, and then it just started going up. And I think the reasons are exactly what you just said. But in addition to that, people have a lot of free time on their hands, and people are like, okay, well, I have to make a change. I have to make a career change, and I've always wanted to fly, so this is the time to do it. This is the time to do it. And I think that's why it's picking up a little bit. So it's kind of funny. You'd expect it to go down, but it actually did the opposite.
Yeah. And I've flown with a few pilots out on the flight line. And, when you've been an airline pilot at a legacy carrier for the last 20, 25 years, unless on the side you're still involved in GA or still involved with something else, you have a tendency to kind of lose sight of the evolving nature of our industry. And I can't tell you how many times I fly with pilots and they're like, I'm not letting my kids get in aviation. Forget it. There's going to be a pilot and a dog in the cockpit in the future. And the dog's just going to be there to bite the hand of the pilot that does the wrong thing. And the pilot's there to just to keep the dog from peeing on the carpet. It's like, wait, what? What are you saying? This is a great time to get into aviation, because now that there's this lull that is temporary, we all agree it's a temporary lull. Now's the time to get in there, get your flight training, get your hours up, so that when the hiring begins, the goal of any seniority-based industry is to get in, like you said, in business, first. Get in at the beginning of the hiring boom. I was fortunate enough to get in the beginning of the hiring boom, thanks to Rob, really, who was like, hey, man, come on over to Sandpiper, because we're going to be hiring, I think it was 600 in 06 or 700 in 07. That's what it was. So I got on in December of 06, and I was the first class to have more than like 10 people in it. I had 47 people in our class. They had to borrow chairs and tables from other classrooms at Sandpiper. And because of that, my career has been very successful. I didn't sit reserve but a few months. When I first started out, I upgraded in a relatively fast pace compared to what it was years earlier. And it was because I was fortunate enough to get in at the beginning of that hiring boom. And I think you have to look at that and go back and go, okay, how am I going to time this correctly? How am I going to get my foot in the door at the right place at the right time with the right company? And I think it all starts of deciding to fly when it's not very popular to do so, because the industry is in a cyclical downturn, which obviously we are. Yeah. We're in the most destructive aviation downturn since 1970s, since deregulation. So
yeah, I got my private September 9th, 2001. That says anything.
Sometimes it's good to go against the tide. I think probably every major thing I've done in my life has been against the advice of others. That's not because I'm a rebellious person, but it's because you got to trust your gut. One of those things was becoming a pilot, first and foremost. At the time, nobody wanted to be a pilot. I would go to LaGuardia Airport and meet up with these regional pilots, and they'd say, don't do it. Go be a doctor, go be a lawyer, go do something else. Choosing the airline that I'm currently at right now, at the time, the pay wasn't great when I was first applying. People didn't really want to be there. The upgrade times were a little high, but I saw the future. I was looking at the facts. I was looking at how things were changing, and I said, no, I'm going to go there. And I'm glad I went there when I did, because my timing has been superb, and I'm in great shape right now because of it. Starting a flight school, I can't tell. I think even my folks, everybody said, don't do it. They said, don't start a flight school. It's a very risky thing to do. They never succeed. They never win. You'll be out of business within a year. I had people that owned flight schools telling me this. But I truly believe that if I stick to my gut and I stick to the plan, and I discussed the plan earlier, then we would be just fine. So don't be discouraged because other people tell you it's not going to work in any aspect of life. Sometimes people's information, the information's outdated, they're uneducated, they're envious, they just don't know, and they think they know. And age doesn't necessarily dictate that either. So just trust your gut, do what you think is right. If it's on paper, it's kind of like math. Math doesn't lie. If it's on paper and it makes sense, just do it.
Yeah. If you're truly dedicated, you won't let a few people to dissuade you from doing it. Do it. I think we've told this story in a previous episode where, I had a supervisor in my previous career who was trying to become a manager, and he he interviewed and didn't get it, and he was just completely deflated. And I said, well, if that's all it took for you to be deflated, then they made a good decision when they didn't hire you, because if you really truly wanted it, you wouldn't let one no stop you. And I think that, like you said, it holds true for every industry, for every career, for every passion, for every art, for every sport. Don't let a defeat define you. And who was it that said, you get hit, you get knocked down, and you got to keep on getting up and keep on hitting? I think that was Rocky Balboa. Sylvester Stallone.
I think I said the same thing once or twice too. So I'll take credit for it. I'll take credit.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Well, so how did that transition work? You were head, first into this business, and yet you still found the time and the opportunity to gain employment at Sandpiper, the company name that we use, the alias that we use here on the show to obviously protect you, protect us, and everyone else, because we don't represent those companies, as the disclaimer at the beginning of the podcast indicates. But so we use Sandpiper as an alias for those that may be thinking, what? From Wings? Yeah, from Wings. How did you progress into getting a job there? Did you just apply one day and said, yeah, it's time?
I applied at 2 airlines at the time, and it was at that point the 2 airlines were very, very similar. They were both subsidiaries, and the decision was essentially who's going to get me in first and where am I going to be based. And I obviously wanted to be based in New York because that's where the school was. That's where I lived at the time. So that's kind of how that happened. I was still doing the flight school, but the school started becoming self-sustained at the time. We brought on instructors. My business partner had it figured out. So I was in a position where I was able to move on, do something else. At the time, I didn't quite want to go to the airlines anymore. I think I had my headset on business and just developing and just going from there. But I had a friend that was at Sandpiper and is now at a legacy carrier. And he said, if you don't do it now, you're going to regret it. And he was absolutely right. The timing couldn't have been any better. And had I waited even 2 months, I'd be in a totally different position now.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. Yeah. Roger, how are you doing on time?
I'm doing all right.
Okay.
I'll probably be going here in 20 minutes.
Oh, okay. So you got some time. Okay.
I got some time.
Well, this is the portion of the interview that I like to ask a couple questions. They're not like quick response questions. We're just trying to kind of get your expertise on some of the questions that are often brought to me and often brought to all of us here through our listeners, either from our website or through emails or social media.
Can I just interject here for 1 second? And you can feel free to cut this out, but I'm a little, on behalf of myself, I'm a little concerned for some of our listeners because I'm feeling pretty insignificant right now compared to Kareem. I'm blown away. And Captain Tony, you always have excellent guests, and I'm sure that you choose these people for this reason. However, I have to admit to the rest of our listeners out there, like myself, if myself and Rob and Captain Rob can do it, anybody can do it. You do not need to take a train by yourself across Long Island to go to school, or join the Civil Air Patrol, or join all these things and wear suits at such a young age. If you pick 1 or 2 of those things, that's great. Kareem here is an exceptional young man and an exceptional aviator.
Unbelievable.
However, I cannot stress enough that for the rest of us mere mortal people, like specifically myself and Captain Rob, that anybody can do it. And I don't want any of us to scare anybody out there away who's thinking about having a career in the airlines and being shied away because of the, quite frankly, I'm blown away, Kareem, by the fortitude of everything that you've been able to do. But for our younger listeners, this is a great career, and it is possible to do it without going through the enormous self-control and self-sacrifice that our man Kareem has obviously done. And my hat's off to you. In all sincerity, my hat's off to you.
Roger, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all. I think you beat me because you had that bird strike and you're on other people's YouTube videos. So I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say. wouldn't say that extraordinary.
Wrong place, wrong time is pretty much all I can say for mine. I didn't have much choice in any of that.
You kept your cool. Your reaction.
That's all I can say.
I'm going to call Roger the lone survivor.
He is a lone survivor of that.
The lone survivor.
A 7-pound freaking
pterodactyl
gizzard.
What was it? What's that bird called? Western grape or something?
Western grape. And maybe like I said, maybe that story does go to show that a normal person can still be a pilot and be successful at it.
Yeah.
And not have to take a 3-hour round trip train ride by themselves across New York. Yeah. In high school.
Yeah. Well, that's tenacity.
If I might add, these were at the time, and look for the younger listeners, at the time, I didn't know I would be here in 2020. I didn't know that I would end up starting a flight school. I didn't know that I would be a flight instructor right out of school. I didn't know any of that. I didn't know. And these weren't goals. It's not like I sat there sitting in bed at the age of 10 and saying, oh, well, I'm going to do this on December of 2020. And I would do this and I would do that.
We thank you for your modesty.
Yeah, it's you take whatever opportunity comes up. I promise you, everybody, the three gentlemen here, in addition to myself and all of you, you're going to have opportunities come up in life. They just happen. I didn't come from an aviation family. I didn't come from an aviation background, but the opportunities present themselves. Your objective at that point should be to take the opportunity and stretch it out. It's kind of like pizza dough. And that's not just an analogy because I'm from Brooklyn, New York, but you take the pizza dough and you stretch it out as much as you can until it tears. That's what everybody should be doing in anything in life. If you just do that and you take every opportunity, sometimes someone would invite me out when I would be in middle school. They'd say, hey, come out to the airport. I'm flying my Citation jet in. I'd be like, oh, I have to take a train 3 hours to go look at a Citation jet. But 13-year-old me at the time was very excited to do that. And I wanted to do that. So I would do it. I would build a relationship. I'd make a new friend. And that friend down the line somehow would end up helping me. So that's really what it is. Take every opportunity to make new friends, to make new mentors, accept the help, ask questions. It's okay. You might not agree with the answer and you don't have to take it to heart, but ask a lot of questions. And like I said earlier, I would ask questions, people would give me answers, and I wouldn't necessarily implement, but I would use the knowledge and say, okay, well, maybe that was okay 5 years ago, but it's not okay now. So it's just take every opportunity. And again, as Roger said, you don't have to do any of the stuff I did. You could very simply just go to a Part 61 flight school. 6 months, you're out the door and you're building flight time and you're at an airline. Totally fine too.
That's all great advice. I said the same thing. You will have those opportunities. And that's pretty much what I did. Take the opportunities that you're given. And, like you had said, go with your gut. Take those opportunities, go with your gut, and just see them through. And if you do those two kind of very basic principles, anybody out there I truly believe can become a pilot.
Yeah, very true. And Roger's relatively modest as well, because, we don't really dive into what he's done other than the basic aviation stuff. But I mean, Roger's run the flight school and the flight operations and he's done quite a bit. Been a part owner in Part 91 private or corporate style operation, and he's an investor. Roger is an investor. Don't let him kid you. So he's being modest too. But Kareem, your story is absolutely impressive and amazing, and you guys are right. You don't have to climb the mountains that you have climbed and the opportunities you've seized to be a part of this industry. But I think what's so wonderful about your story is that it is inspiring that you took that grit, that New York grit, and said, you know what? Yeah, that's a great opportunity. Let me try that. And you put yourself out there and people see that. And that is, I think, what has led to such success at a young age, because you're in your 20s and you're like, I know people that are in their 70s getting ready to retire and have not accomplished as much as you have. So my hat's off to you. And that's really the whole point here, is that we absolutely applaud you for your tenacity, your drive, because without those things, a lazy a lazy pilot that just likes to sit around and drink beer and eat chicken wings and yeah, come on, Roger. No, they're gonna like, well, I just show up, do my job because that's what they tell me to do, and I'm gonna fly the plan, and it's not my job to go the extra mile. Actually, it is, and the only person you hurt when you have that mentality is yourself because you close those doors.
If I might add, the things that I've done in my life were not necessarily to become an airline pilot. They're not limited to just aviation. I have interests outside of aviation, and I have many goals outside of aviation. All of these events that have taken place from middle school, high school, have all just been experience. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've burnt bridges. I've made those mistakes. I've lost friends. I've made those mistakes. And with every passing opportunity, with every passing experience, just comes more and more good knowledge, good experience, and very tough lessons to learn. So yeah, I mean, all of this has just been a life adventure for just overall, just rounding myself as a person and my life and my career, even past aviation, well past aviation.
We're going to hear more about Kareem's amazing journey right after the break. And welcome back to the show. Well, in the first half of this episode, we were talking to Kareem about his journey in aviation and how impressed we all are with how much he's accomplished at a very young age and how that grit and determination and tenacity really has taken him very far. And what I'd like to dive into now, as we often do here on the broadcast, is talk to Kareem about his take on a lot of what's happening in the industry and really get a feel for what he thinks about the future of aviation and this incredible journey. So Kareem, what do you see as the biggest threat to our profession today?
I think the threats have always been around. I mean, automation, pilotless cockpits, one pilot cockpit, all that's kind of, people have been talking about that forever, and it might be within our career, it might be after us. I mean, nobody knows. But I think what this pandemic did is it enlightened everybody, and it brought a lot of attention to the industry, and it showed how sensitive and I guess nimble this industry can be. And I think it's going to get a lot of people thinking about what now, what are we doing next? Obviously, in order to cut costs, some airlines opted to furlough in order to cut costs. And so salaries are a big concern, and so on and so forth. So I think what this pandemic did is it brought a lot of attention to that. It's educating us. It's teaching us a lot. And it's also kind of catching everybody with their pants down a little bit, because even I think the managers and the executives at the airlines kind of are a little confused as to what to do next. For instance, you look at some of the airlines that did furlough. Now as demand starting to pick up for the holidays, airlines are canceling flights. They're short on pilots. They're short on flight attendants. So it really, truly is a learning experience. We're going to navigate this. We're going to get through it. And hopefully for the future, we're going to have a better plan and a better course of action to take, because this one's kind of the one that's beating us up a little bit.
Yeah. So really the biggest threat is where financially these airlines are going to end up in the wake of this global pandemic that is, as we mentioned earlier, one of the hardest hitting to this industry since 1974. It's kind of a new territory, because even after 9/11, things were very different. And when a pilot tells me, well, I got furloughed after 9/11 and I survived just fine, it's like, well, this isn't 9/11. This isn't
different.
This is completely new territory.
Totally different dynamics.
And we're in a different time as well. We're in a time where technology and division, divisiveness in our government and in the world leaders is at an all-time high. So we need to stick together, I think. I think the way we combat this threat that we're dealing with is to stick together, and at a time when, just yesterday, Southwest Airlines indicated that they sent out warn letters to close to 7,000 workers, of which I think it was around 1,200 were pilots. This is monumental. Southwest has never furloughed in its history. So how do we react? How do we come back from this? It's anybody's guess. We've been talking about this on the show for quite some time. We don't pretend to have that crystal ball, and I think anybody that does is really doing a great disservice to those of us that are paying close attention. But thank you for your response on that. One thing that we've been talking about for quite some time, and maybe now is a good time to revisit it, is the question of, does the hub and spoke system of the regional airline industries in the U.S. still work? What are your thoughts?
I'd like to just go back 30 seconds and just touch on what you just said, because I think this is important to know. As I indicated at the beginning of the podcast, in any business, in order to succeed, you've got to be the cheapest, the most unique. And David Neeleman, the CEO of JetBlue, the I guess owner and CEO of Azul, and now Breeze Airways out of Salt Lake City, is taking a huge risk, and he's doing something very unique and something very different. And I think that's needed. And what he's doing is he's creating the first, I guess, app-based airline. Everything is done via an app. What that does is it reduces the overhead. There's very little overhead. There's very little ticket agents. I mean, you can just go on this app. You select what you're trying to do, blah, blah, blah. You show up to the airport. There's kiosks. You do everything yourself. You're on an airplane. And what that's doing is it's cutting costs significantly, and it's doing something that no other airline has done. That is the type of risk that is necessary. That's the type of innovation that's necessary, in my opinion, in 2020, because the airlines have been operating, essentially the wheel hasn't changed in forever and ever and ever. Yeah. And he's not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but he's modernizing, and he's essentially growing with the times. Some airlines, you show up to any airport, every airline's got them. You run into a gate agent or a ticket agent that's having a bad day. And what that does is that one person might essentially instill a bitter taste in a customer's mouth, and then they're bitter at the whole airline over one person. What I think Breeze Airways is doing is eliminating all of that. It's eliminating cost with overhead, and it's modernizing. I think it's going to go really, really well doing an app-based airline, and it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, they could do very, very well and they'll succeed, or they could do the complete opposite, and I guess we'll find out. But once that does happen, I think the rest of the industry is going to have a very good indication on what to do next and how to modernize and how to become tech savvy, if you would.
That's neat, because you think of like companies, obviously like Amazon and like the Targets and the Walmarts, they have all, are transitioned over to, the app-based, online, you buy it and it just shows up at your door, or you can, do a drive-by and they put it in your trunk, or even like buying a car, like a car, if you guys have Carvana, or, in your area, that it's app-based, you buy the car online, and then they'll either deliver it to your door, or, you go there with a, for fun, you just put like a big coin in the machine and your car comes down and it spits it out at the bottom of the chute. And, but yeah, that's interesting that Breeze Airways, I think they've got something there. And I'm sure that, if they handle it right, they're going to definitely find some traction, and if not be just, the leader, the innovator in the tech part of that the industry that way.
Yeah, to touch on the hubs, I mean, they're based out of Salt Lake City, but my understanding, the plan is they're just going to fly wherever they can, and wherever they're focusing on smaller cities, but they're not necessarily limiting themselves like several other airlines, or the majority of the airlines. They're not necessarily only doing hub to hub or touching on a specific demographic or a specific area of the country. They're just opening up their options. They're buying extended range aircraft. I assume that's an indication that eventually they'd like to do transatlantic or whatever. But that's good. They're doing things that are very, very different. And again, you've got to take the risk. You've got to do something kind of a little bit risky in your industry in order to see if it'll work. I mean, if you don't try it, you're never going to know.
Yeah. I think the biggest threat, not just to business in this industry, but also to the mindset of a professional aviator, is to think that doing the same thing, the traditional, well, that's the way it's always been done. I think that comment is one of the most damaging comments any business in this country or in around the world can ever adopt. If you think, well, this is the way it's always been done, you're going to be left behind. And I didn't know about the Breeze Airways. It's very interesting, and I'll put a link in the show notes as well to their website. I do think you're absolutely right. You mentioned it earlier. You have to be first or cheapest or unique, and I think being unique means also being ahead of the game and keeping up with the times and technology and how it doubles every other year in capacity. And it's only a matter of time before everything will be done off of our probably a embedded cell phone in our arm. Who knows?
Yeah.
but yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for that follow up as well.
And I think that answers your last question in regards to just the way things have been done and whatnot. And they're advertising the airline. I am not a spokesman for them. I know nothing about them. I'm just the stuff that's on the internet. But they're advertising that they're going to be the world's nicest airline. That's actually what they say, and that's because now you're dealing with robots in an app. There's an app for everything in today's world. That's crazy, right? There's an app for everything. For ordering suits, there's an app. For coffee, for cars, as you said, there's an app for taxis, car service, everything.
Yeah,
it's very
Artificial
convenient. Everybody's got one of these, and it's very convenient to just pop it up, say, "Oh, I need to go to LA. I need to go to LA cheap."
Yeah.
And there's a meal too. And with reducing the overhead and doing this, I think that's going to work.
It just seems like if the interface is user friendly, then the users are going to love the company. I mean, that's how it is with like the Alexa app or whatever, Amazon, oh, this is great. I love Amazon because it's that easy.
Who doesn't love Amazon? I mean,
I know.
I don't even comp shop on. I don't even type anything in Google anymore. I'm looking for something, everything from car parts to audio gear to pilot stuff.
And if I can't find it on there, then I start looking at the other places. But still, you're right. If you like it, you like it.
It's become more and more convenient. I mean, you get stuff shipped to you in a day. Sometimes the same day, like living in the DFW area where we have a warehouse down the block. I'll literally swipe. The order will be here sometimes that same day. I'm like, all right, well, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So,
you'll probably be the first to get one of those drone deliveries because I live also.
They're doing it already, I believe.
Ontario Airport's right down the street, and the Amazon warehouse is huge over there. Yeah, I'm waiting for that drone. I'll put in a helipad. I don't care, man. I want that drone to drop stuff off.
Cool.
It's impressive. It's certainly impressive. I'm excited to see the airline industry is going to have to make changes. We need changes. Now, the airline industry is very stubborn. All the industry's been doing over the last 20, 30 years is taking things away. That's all they've been doing. They haven't been evolving. They've been taking things away. They take away legroom. They take away meals. They take away in-flight service. I mean, they take away whatever they take. They take away the screens, the entertainment screens. It's going to be interesting to see how we're going to evolve and change and do something unique as opposed to taking things away.
Yeah.
And it's going to take some real innovators to be up there in the top on the board to really push for that, because change does cost money. And when you're leading a company or an industry by the spreadsheet, it's not going to last very long. So very true. Totally agree. What do you think of these student pilots that are coming through? Being that you're involved, you have the flight school. Do you feel that students today are as prepared or as willing to do the work as students of days past?
I think they are. I think anybody that has the flying bug is equally as motivated on their own level as any other pilot, especially at the beginning. I mean, my level of motivation was much higher when I was a student than it is right now, I would say. And then you get there and then things change. I think what I recommend for everybody, and I would say this maybe is a little bit controversial, but what I recommend for everybody is to focus your attention on other things in addition to flying. Get to the airlines, do it, get there. But please focus your attention on other things. A lot of people go to aviation colleges, right? When they get an aviation degree, and that's fine and dandy. And that's phenomenal. I personally didn't have that experience. I wish I would have had the experience. Just to say, I went that route, but I didn't. Instead, I focused my attention and on other things, and I think that really pays off, especially today, especially with the way the airline industry is moving and how I guess the future of aviation is projected to be. I think it's important to have a backup plan, and not necessarily a backup plan, but to have other options to do other things on your days off. What are you doing? Are you running a podcast? Are you running a successful YouTube channel? Are you running a business? Do you own a restaurant? It's good to have other options. It also keeps you excited. It keeps you motivated, and you don't get bored, because no matter how much you love the job, we all love it. We all love flying. It gets a little boring sometimes. It has its moments like anything else. It's good to have other options.
Yeah,
Nice.
You need balance, I think, and it doesn't matter just profession, but in your life. I've learned this, still learning it today. You need balance. You need to have your time. You need to have the time you dedicate to family. You need the time you dedicate to your career and your growth. A lot of people forget about growth. They get stuck in a career because they know how to do it, and they sometimes even get stuck on an airplane because they go, well, I don't have to go to long-term ground school and learn something new. I've been on this airplane for years. I know what to do. I don't have to study when I go for my recurrent. Why am I going to make it hard on myself? Well, that puts people in kind of a rut, and then they get stuck. And then when the opportunity diminishes and maybe that fleet's no longer there, and that's the only thing you've been flying for 10, 15 years, and now you got to go learn an all new airplane that's extremely more technologically advanced than what you're used to, it kind of makes it difficult for you. So always keep that balance in your life. I think you're absolutely right. You gotta kind of look at other options and not put all your eggs in one basket, as they say.
There's an old saying, and I'm a strong believer of it: the sky's the limit. What does that mean? We all have our goals. There's 3 pilots in this podcast right now, and we all had the goal to become airline pilots, and we did everything in our power. 3 different paths, but we did everything in our power, and we've all made it. The sky's the limit, and it's very easy to get distracted by one goal. You become an airline pilot, you're stuck there, you're happy with your fixed salary that does go up a little bit every year, you're happy with the one aircraft that you fly, with your quality of life, and then it just plateaus, and then you're done for life. I don't believe in that. I believe in continuous growth. The sky's the limit. We're all capable. Everybody's capable of doing as much as possible and just continuing to grow. And I think everybody should have that goal.
Yeah, I think we talk about this often when you're new on an aircraft. So you come in, you're new on an aircraft, maybe you came from some experience from before, and you're laser focused, and you've got that tunnel vision, and you got these horse blinders on, and all you can do is look straight ahead at your goal. And as you get more experience, these blinders start to move back on your head, and you get a little bit better wide angle view of what you are trying to accomplish. And it's not until you really build a lot of that time and experience that you can kind of see the big picture. And once you see the big picture, you don't want to go back to that super focused tunnel vision view because you get comfortable. So, like you're saying, I think it's important to always challenge yourself and move forward and not get stagnant in a particular rut. So students that are coming through, you're saying that they're prepared, they're motivated. What is the biggest hurdle that you think a student in 2020 would come across?
Probably job hunting. I'm speaking based off of today's date in December of 2020. Right now, it's kind of difficult to find a job. And I'm sure in maybe the corporate world and the smaller cargo world where there's no contracts or unions, the pay might decrease a little bit. The benefits may decrease because there's an influx of pilots. That's going to change very, very quick in the upcoming months, I project, with the vaccine and whatnot. So with all that being said, I think the biggest challenge is to stay motivated. I can't tell you how many students have reached out to me and said, maybe I should look at something else, or I'm probably not going to have a job for the next 10 years. Oh, that's not necessarily true. I wouldn't say that. I will bounce back, but yeah, I think the biggest thing is to just stay motivated. I think that's what most people are struggling with today. Getting a job and staying motivated, because I know a few people, my best friend included, that I mentioned earlier, the Harvard grad. He went to Harvard. He has this insane economics degree. He's a helicopter pilot, commercial flight instructor, you name it. And I got him a job with us. I referred him and he got a job. And unfortunately, COVID happened and he never started because they took that option away from him. Yeah. And he's still very motivated to try it. So it's keeping people like that motivated.
So, Kareem, you talked about the sky's the limit. You talked about, we talked about balance. And obviously, you have quite a journey with, owning the flight school and becoming an airline pilot. What does the future hold for Kareem? Where do you see yourself personally? Where do you see yourself professionally? Do you have any irons in the anything in the fire here that you're working on that you'd like to grow or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm very cautious with that question. I'm happy to answer it with being a little vague. I am working on quite a bit. I am working with my folks, and they're also in business, and I'm working in their health. They're in the health industry. They're in the food business. They're in real estate development. They're in quite a bit. Wow. As a matter of fact, my mother and stepfather.
Sounds like I know where you got all your inspiration from then, but keep going.
I think so. My mother and stepfather touched down in Dubai a few hours ago, working on a project that I came up with, and I'm very excited about that. Excellent. I'd like to share it eventually, and I think eventually we're going to share it publicly. But I am working on a food industry project right now in Virginia. We're in the health industry and the dietary supplement, natural health industry as well. And I've worked on rebranding one of their products and bringing it to the U.S. from Asia and from the Middle East. And my true passion, I would say, is real estate. And there's a project that we're working on that I can hopefully share very soon, and that's going to be very exciting. So this is a tough thing because the question is, am I going to stay in the aviation industry? Am I going to retire in the aviation industry? And I don't like bringing it up, but we brought it up. And it's good for people to see that sometimes the plan deviates, the plans change, sure. Things change. And my answer is, I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to retire in the aviation industry. I don't think I'm going to be here forever. Not because I hate it, not because I can't stand it. I love it. Love flying. The people are great. Everything's great. But there's other things that I enjoy, I think, a little more. And as these things materialize and as my plans progress and as opportunities come up, you start to kind of the same boat I was in when I left flight instructing to go to Ameriflight and then left Ameriflight to open up a school. You have to pick. At that point, You just have to pick. Otherwise, it becomes way too overwhelming. I sleep very little as it is right now, and there's only enough hours in the day. So yeah, it's tough. It's a tough thing, but there is a lot in store coming up. Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I started that YouTube channel. The YouTube channel isn't necessarily going to be an aviation channel. It's more so going to be a business development channel. So the episode 1, this is a very new thing. Vlog episode 1 is about how to start a flight school, and hopefully episodes 2 and onwards are going to be about other things as well.
Oh, that's really amazing.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now we look forward to that, and we will put a link in the show notes.
Fantastic.
So circling back a little bit to your flying history, what's been the scariest moment at the controls, and what did you learn?
Emergency wise?
Scary.
Sort of like, sure. Scary was probably upgrading the captain. And it wasn't the day of. It wasn't I'm sitting here in the seat and it's scary. It was the days leading up to the first flight as a captain. It was, I call them captain nightmares. And I thought it was just me, but I talked to my other friends that upgraded, and it seems like everybody had the captain nightmares.
Oh yeah. All the ridiculous what if scenarios you put yourself in.
Ridiculous. I mean, just unrealistic. I mean, the airplane's deformed and you're in a dream and weird things are happening. It's just insane. But then you finally get there. You get over your first month. You get over your first 100 hours where it seems like every possible emergency that'll happen happened in my first 100 hours. And you get over it, and then you realize it's like anything else. But scariest, I would say, was probably knowing that the upgrade's coming and you finish training and you're waiting for IOE. That was a unique experience in time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hurdle for all of us that have gone through it. And, you know, and you got through it. Was it, when you look back, was it warranted?
It wasn't worth the worrying. I think it just happened because you worked this hard your whole career in the aviation industry. In my case, I started flying in 2010 and it finally hits you and you're like, oh, it's here. And it's all on me now. And I've had emergencies. I had my very first emergency and it was a brace for impact type emergency. It was a very serious one within my first 3 months, I think instead of 3 months of when I upgraded. But handled it just fine. I had a phenomenal crew. We kept everybody so calm.
What was it?
Yeah, now
Come on.
It was a dual brake fault situation, and you follow.
I've got pictures of mine. Left hand brake fault and right hand brake fault.
Yeah. Okay, so same boat. And as you know, I don't know if it's the same airplane that you flew, but what the book only has details for one set. It doesn't have a procedure for both sets. And what that tells you is you're probably going to go off the end of the runway. Now you have to use your thinking cap. Yeah. And you ask yourself, what's the likelihood of both of them actually failing at once? Probably low, but you have to treat it as if that's it. Yeah. That's it.
It's the one.
And you have to treat it as if they both did in fact fail. So that was one of those. But we kept the passengers and everybody in the crew so calm that they were still watching their movie when we landed. And I thought that was funny. Yeah.
Don't interrupt my Netflix, damn it.
The flight attendant said, "You kept them so calm. They were still watching their movies." I said, "Good. That's what we want."
That's funny. Yeah. My incident with that was I was conducting IOE with a new hire, and I've shared this story, Tony, on previous podcasts, and so that was kind of a story in itself. But if I remember going through the QRH for that particular fault, in at least the time that I was flying the aircraft, the another procedure, the brake fail procedure, was right in the same general area, and it had the same malfunction increments and same procedures as this brake fault. So it seemed like they were saying, "Hey, we don't know if you're going to have any brakes at all, but so make sure you do it. You land on the longest runway and prepare to use the emergency parking brake and the thrust reversers and flaps and." If you have parachutes and anchors can throw out on the runway, let's use those too.
It was really interesting. And I remember on that flight, for whatever reason, we had an obnoxious amount of lap babies on the airplane. And that was a concern. Yeah, that was a concern. It was like, we're gonna have a bunch of meat missiles flying out, so nobody really wants that. So that was a major concern, and the event is no reflection on the airline or maintenance or anything. It's just a thing with the airplane, with that specific airplane. I mean, and it was just a goofy little indication. I mean, everything was fine at the end, and but it's that's one of the things. You all know, you have two captains here, and you know that when something happens, you follow the book, you do what you're trained, you use good judgment, and it all seems to work out at the end.
Yeah.
Yep. Nice job.
Very nice job. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
With your students, glass or steam gauges?
I'm all steam gauge. I always have been.
Yeah.
Old school steam gauge. I still teach. I don't instruct anymore, but at the time I still taught VORs. Just steam gauge 100%. You can go to glass when you get your commercial rating or when you become a flight instructor. I didn't touch a glass airplane until I became a flight instructor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Same here. Yeah. I am a very huge supporter of learning in the most basic aircraft, get your first 10 hours where there's not a single distraction other than airspeed, altitude, and coordination.
Yeah.
And then work up from there and introduce a new instrument as the student progresses. That's actually one of the things I used to have in my goodie bag is all those little post-it gauge covers. Yep.
Yeah.
And then you go, okay, these are the only in your scan today. This is the only 3 I want you to look at. Okay, you're doing really good. All right, now pull one of those off. Now you got 4 gauges to scan, and that didn't overwhelm people. And so the fact that you got these flight schools and they're saying, oh, we have all glass cockpit. We have the Cirrus aircraft fleet, one of the newest fleet. You could always pull the parachute and all this stuff. And the student's like, oh, wow, this is great. And then they go and get their private and they're like, I'm a real pilot. And then they go with a buddy that goes, hey, I got this old 1968 Baron. Let's go fly it. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. And then you get in the airplane. You're like, what the hell am I doing?
It's even funnier when they go to an airline and they're put on an old airplane. And then they're like,
yeah, for your interview.
Where the airliner has less technology. I do think that's hilarious. I was a hardcore flight instructor, I would say. I would take my hand, put it on the student's forehead like this and hold their head back. And I said, you can't look down. You can't look down. You're looking straight ahead outside the window. For private students, I'd say you're not allowed to look down. And that's how I instilled the 90% outside, 10% inside
nice.
thing with the students. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. So, you have some experience and an appreciation for law enforcement. I appreciate that. I, too, have a law enforcement family. And I know Rob has an appreciation for law enforcement, firefighting, and our military. Yeah. Absolutely. Would you consider an FFDO program? And for those listeners that are like, what's that? A Federal Flight Deck Officer, which is a program started after 9/11. And there's people out there, pilots that have been highly trained and authorized to be basically a federal law enforcement style while they are at the controls of an airplane in the event of some kind of event. Would you consider that?
Yeah, I think it's a great program. I think recently they've just declassified a lot of the details of the program, and it is public information. It's a great program. I think it's a necessary program. I'm glad that the government took steps back then when they needed to in order to ensure this program succeeds. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine who's over at one of the legacy cargo airlines is one of the people that pushed us through. He lost both his parents on 9/11, and he's an airline pilot, and he's one of the reasons why that program exists. So I'm a huge supporter of that program, and I think it's a great one for sure.
Yeah. Now I've my best friend is a devout FFDO. It has been since forever. Has been trying to get me to do it, and somebody asked me the other day, what's FFDO? So I thought I'd throw it in there. So thank you for answering that.
Sure.
What's your favorite aviation film?
Probably Pushing 10 is a great one.
Yes.
It's actually the air traffic. Yeah. I think that's a great one. Mm-hmm. I think that's a great movie. Pushing 10. Dare I say, Top Gun. I think it's, I only like the intro at the beginning with the music. That's about it.
That's it.
I think another one, only because they did such a great job and the attention to detail. Sully, they did a really good job on the details. They did. Yeah. They were just, even the registration on the back of the airplane was accurate. The maintenance log, the checklists. I mean, they just did a good job.
Yeah.
There was a slip up in the movie, in case you guys were wondering. I want to put that out there. At the beginning of the film, there was a new painted American Airlines plane sitting there, and at the time, the new American
livery
wasn't a thing
there yet.
So otherwise, they did a great job. Yeah,
yeah. And I saw a few interviews with Tom Hanks and Sully together, and it's interesting to hear how they were. They were very lucky. A lot of people go, oh, is that real? I was like, yeah, they were very lucky. Everything kind of fell into place. The dominoes fell where they did, and no one was seriously injured. And thank God for that. What's your favorite part of the job?
My favorite part of the job, the satisfaction that I get when I see people, especially during the holidays, where it's the toughest time for a pilot to be working because you're not with your family, but seeing other people united with their families, that's a very exciting one. And meeting a very upbeat and excited crew that you can take out on a layover, where you can just not talk about flying, that we all forget that we're all coworkers and that we're on a work trip. And then we go out in Mexico or whatever. One of my best trips ever. I took the whole crew out and we had a 4-day Mexico trip, 3 different cities in Mexico. And we had a blast. And I stayed in touch with that crew. We all went out on a boat on our days off. And it's just, It's been a really good time. So I do enjoy going out on the layovers. Where it's just, you kind of just forget that we're in aviation and we don't talk about it and we just go out and have a really good time.
So you don't review approaches and procedures and you go through your operations manual on your layover? What are you talking about?
I take the whole work thing very seriously. I'm like, nope, stop. I don't know what you're talking about.
Not allowed. Whoever talks about work first has to buy the first round. That's my goal.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah. So we kind of mentioned, Rob talked about where you're going to be in the future. What about the immediate future? Where do you see yourself in, say, 3 years?
I don't want to get myself into trouble. I don't know. That's a tough one. That really is a tough one. I'm trying out a lot right now, a lot of new stuff that I haven't tried before. I have great parents that are very supportive, that have a lot of experience, and through a lot of trial and error and a lot of begging and a lot of proving myself, I'm now starting to participate in a lot of other things. So that's a tough question. I really don't know where I'm going to be in 3 years.
But you're juggling a lot.
I'm juggling a lot, but you know what? That's kind of how I've always lived my life. As I said earlier, a little while ago, I don't sit there and say, oh, well, in 2020, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, blah, blah, blah. I just kind of take every opportunity and I go with the flow. So that's a tough question, but it's good. You don't want to fixate on a goal, because if you fixate, that's when things fall apart. You become unmotivated and then things just fall apart. You want to be flexible. You want to be fluid, and you got to evolve.
Yeah. So staying flexible is really
absolutely
is really the
big
key.
believer. That's been staying flexible is the reason why I've succeeded at the things I've succeeded in. Because if one way doesn't work out, you try something else. If that doesn't work out, you try something. There's always a way to do something.
Yeah.
There's always a way. It's just having the discipline to say, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's move on.
What's the common misconception of our profession, and can you debunk it?
What a misconception. That's a tough one. I don't know.
That's a new one for us.
That autopilot does everything. That's not true. The autopilot usually screws up everything, and we're there to fix it. I don't know. That really is a tough one. That's a tough one. Maybe alcohol and drugs, like you see in the movies. That's not at all how it goes, folks. For people listening in, that's false. That's a tough question. I'd have to get back to you at a later time when I figure it out myself.
Yeah, and what's been your biggest failure so far, and what did you learn from it?
My biggest failure has been being too naive, oversharing details about my life with coworkers. I think there's a time and a place.
Or podcasters.
That's right.
Just kidding.
I still haven't learned my lesson. No, I think biggest failure has truly been just maybe not paying attention to how I'm portraying myself to other people and what other people might be interpreting when I speak or when I do something. So I've learned through many years of trial and error and mistakes and backfires that it's good to listen. You've got 2 ears for a reason. Listen before you speak. So yeah, that's caused several failures, to answer your question. Several failures. And that's a good lesson.
Yeah, very good lesson. We talk about it all the time that pilots naturally have foot and mouth disease. You got to know your audience. I learned that lesson early on. I've been fortunate enough to have a partner in life that she keeps telling me, know your audience. Don't have the conversation always circle around, your goals, and always listen and ask questions and all the things that have, I think, developed my ability to get along with a variety of different personalities. We used to ask a lot, how do you deal with conflicting personalities in the cockpit? And we always were getting different answers from the people that we interviewed about, you just, don't sweat the people that don't rub the right way in terms of meshing in personality wise, and just really appreciate those that you get along with. And I think that all comes down to not them, but you and how you respond. Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely.
I would have to agree. I would have to wholeheartedly agree with that. I can't tell you how many times, especially in New York, I was a very senior first officer, and I flew with very senior captains at the time that were much, much older than I was, probably old enough to be my grandparents in some cases. And they were rough around the edges at first. And what I would tell myself at the time is, it's on me now. It's all on me. I have to make an effort to get these people out of their shell and have them trust me and know that I'm here to support them in order to do an effective and good job. And I've succeeded many times at that. So sometimes when someone's rough around the edges, don't get discouraged and don't think that you're doing something wrong, but instead figure out how we can change that and how you can connect with that person. And you'll find that it's very easy to succeed at that.
Absolutely.
Very good.
So, Kareem, if you can go back in time just for a moment and whisper in your own ear as a younger self, what would you tell yourself?
Yeah. Well, first of all, look at him. He's already young, man. He's probably talking to himself right now.
It's like boss baby over here. Like, let me tell you about this business venture I've got. I love it.
By the way, pick me up some sushi on the way back. Okay, good.
If I could go back, I would whisper to be patient, maybe slow down a little bit. Don't hit things as hard as I did in the past. In my earlier years, getting into business for the first time, maybe to be more understanding and kinder to people, and understand that not everybody's motivation level is at the same level as mine. And everybody has their own interests, and everybody has their own level of motivation for their specific job and task. So don't get overly excited because other people aren't performing the way you might perform, because everybody's different and everyone's got different motivations. Another thing is, another little piece of advice for me personally is, when you do get to the airlines, keep to yourself, keep your head down, keep your nose clean, and listen more instead of talking more. That's always a good lesson in anything you do.
Man, I wish I could learn that one.
Yeah. Me too.
Oh man, it's like I keep repeating the same. I'm like, so yeah, and the combination to the safe is.
Yeah, we're not supposed to share this, but
yeah, it's like yeah. Well, sage advice.
Yeah, totally.
So last few questions: who has had the biggest impact in your career, and why?
That's a tough one. I would say the biggest impact of my career, of my aviation career, was thanks to a friend of mine. His name is Eddie. Eddie has since left the airline I'm at now and has moved on to a legacy carrier. Unfortunately, he's furloughed now, and now he's flying cargo temporarily. But Eddie was the one that really motivated me at the time to accept the job offer and to just try it. And had I not done that, I don't know where I'd be right now in terms of my aviation career. So he's probably had the largest bit of impact because of just saying, hey, just try it.
Yeah. Sometimes it's amazing how the smallest connections, the smallest phrases and keywords can really affect a huge change in one's path. That's great. And thank you for sharing that. Sure. Final question. What do you believe defines leadership?
Defining leadership, sometimes going against the tide. I think that's a big one. Just because somebody says something or that's the way things have always been done doesn't necessarily mean that's going to work now or that's going to work in every situation. Sticking with your gut, not being intimidated, not being pushed around because People might disagree. I think if you truly believe honestly, if you're honestly believing that what you're trying to do or what you're acting on is genuine and accurate, then stick with your gut, because chances are, if you're less emotional than the other person, you're probably on track to doing the right thing. So maybe keeping emotions out of it is very important.
Yeah, great advice. One of my favorite books, self-help books that is usually my go-to reading, is a book called Crucial Conversations. It's a phenomenal read, and it speaks exactly of what you just mentioned. Why do some people seem to get ahead in life? And we often put labels on things, and say, oh, well, they were born with a silver spoon, or they've got money, they come from money, that they come from talent, or they look a certain way, and truthfully, if you really dive into the psychology of what they may have over someone else, is that they can recognize when a crucial conversation is happening in their life, and they can stop, remove the emotion, take away the micro stories that we tell each other while we allegedly are listening to the situation, the other person, and remove the emotion and respond in kind with usually a question more than a statement. And you got to ask yourself not just what people are saying to you, but what their intent is and what they're trying to get across and where is this coming from. And once you learn these tools, that it opens up a world of relationships for yourself.
Two little pieces of information and advice, things that have benefited me in the past in business outside of flying. First and foremost, listen to your people, listen to the employees, listen to your partners. Even in some cases, I think I've made decisions based off of what other people tell me, even if I don't 1,000, but because it's different when you're in a leadership position. In a leadership position, you can elect to listen to other people that might have a little more experience than you do. That does one of two things. If what they tell you to do is correct and you end up succeeding, then the team effort's there. You guys did a great job. If you fail because of what another person told you, then you have somebody to blame. And it looks a lot better to blame somebody than blame yourself in those instances of leadership. So that's one little piece of advice. So definitely listen and implement based off of other people's suggestions. Number two, in negotiating situations or in situations where there's a mutual benefit involved, it's really important to ask more questions, because it gives you more information on the other person, which ends up actually benefiting you. So it's really important to ask someone right off the bat, what do you want? Tell me everything you want and everything you expect. And usually people overshare and they talk and talk and talk. And the more you get them talking, the more it benefits you, because you've covered every avenue and you truly understand where they're coming from. And that just eliminates a lot of the manipulation. It eliminates a lot of the nonsense that's involved with going back and forth.
Yeah, very true. So where can our listeners connect with you online and on the socials?
Probably Instagram is a very good one. I'm fairly active on there. So at iFlyMetalBirds. And maybe hopefully if this YouTube channel continues on and we have more content, then hopefully on there.
Okay, excellent. And cool. I'll, with your permission, I'll put links in the show notes.
Absolutely.
To where they can find you. And of course, the Icarus Flight Academy website. I'll have a link to that as well.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Absolutely. Well, if you're in the New York or tri-state area, stop by. We're always welcome to, anyone's welcome to stopping by for a tour at any of the locations.
Cool. Excellent. Well, it was an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you today. I thank you for your time and your effort, your diligence, and the inspiration that you have shared with all of our listeners, how much you've accomplished. I expect to see some great things from you, so no pressure. Be following you for some time to come, and I'm looking forward to hearing about the next adventure with you.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I genuinely hope that by staying active on social media and doing these podcasts and whatnot, that in a few years people will walk up to me and say, hey, something you said or something you did on one of these podcasts and channels has really kept me motivated and has helped me make the right decision.
That's what it's all about, my friend. That is what it's all about.
Now, first of all, I just got to say, Kareem, it's been an honor and a pleasure to sit down and chat with you. You are quite an amazing individual. You got so many things going on, and you seem to have it all just, going in the right direction. And you've got a great future ahead of you. You're obviously a great pilot, great captain, and we wish you all the best of luck in business and in, your airline and personal life.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Are you enjoying Squawk Ident Podcast? If you do and you find value in our podcast, we encourage you to visit our website at aviatortony.com. That's Alpha, Victor, the number 8, Romeo, Tango, Oscar, November, Yankee.com. From there, right on the homepage, you can find methods to contribute to the show by becoming a producer with either a one-time donation or recurrent contributions. Every little bit helps with our production and marketing expenses. You can also leave us some feedback, either from the website or from your podcast player as well. You can view the many photos we've shared from the flight line, and under the guest book tab, you can view images of our featured guests that they've shared with us as well. Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube users can now find us under Squawk Ident Podcast. We encourage you to support our show on the YouTube channel with a like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to select the bell to be notified for any new videos. In closing, I would like to say thank you so much for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there, be safe, and take care of each other. Bye, everyone. See ya.
Have a good one.
Adios.
It's been a great show. Thanks, Roger.
All right, take care. Thanks, Captain.